Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is an update, March 18th, 2020 on COVID-19. So I was just watching CNN and a couple things. Sanjay Gupta had made the comment that we should all be acting as if we and everybody else have COVID-19 because there are so many asymptomatic cases. And I really want to give him kudos for that recommendation because I feel exactly the same way. And let me explain why. I mean, you've heard a few anecdotal cases, if you've been watching the news, of somebody who has tested positive and has no symptoms. But what you don't know is how many there are, and nobody knows that, but we know there are a ton of them out there. In fact, I would not be surprised at all if there are more people shedding the virus right now who have no symptoms than have symptoms. And why do I say that? Well, we know in testing contacts of patients and also trace contact studies, like that one conference in Germany where a person came over there and after they left, they became symptomatic, and meanwhile at the conference, this asymptomatic person infected like a whole bunch of other people at the conference. So we know they exist. We know they are contagious. We also know that there are people who, during the course of their infection, it goes like this. You're exposed to a person who has the virus. You then incubate the virus. In other words, there's a period of time between when you're exposed to the virus and you actually become ill with it. But we've also discovered that there's also a period of time between and during the incubation period, before the person has symptoms and they realize they have it, they can shed the virus, and this can last for days. We don't know exactly how long it happens and what percentage of the cases do this, but we know it's significant. So we also know that there are a bunch of people who never develop symptoms, but again, they're spreading it. We also know that people who, and this is from studies in China, that they have had CT scans of their lungs. It turns out that the CT scan of the lung is a good test for COVID-19. It's very sensitive. It's only 50% specific, but it's 97% sensitive, meaning it'll find 97% of the patients who have this infection. Some of these people who have pneumonia by CT scan have no symptoms. Unbelievable. It's like you've heard of walking pneumonia. All these people have sort of like a walking pneumonia from COVID-19. In fact, they're even milder than walking. Usually people with walking pneumonia will have a cough or something. These people aren't coughing, they have no fever, and they've got pneumonia on CT scan. Now, many of them eventually go on to have symptoms, but there's a period of time between exposure and the symptoms where they've got this, and usually they're shedding virus at that point. So you've got a whole big population out there who are spreading it. Plus you've got kids who don't get as sick as often as adults do, although they do get sick and some of them die from it, but not as often as adults. But they can be extremely effective in spreading the infection, and if they don't have symptoms and not realizing they're sick, they're not taking precautions. So with a huge, if you can't tell who the people are because many of them have no symptoms, you have to treat everyone, including yourself, as if you have it, because you may have it. You may have it right now as you're listening to this video and not have a clue that you've got it. And if that's the worst of it, well, that's fine for you, but meanwhile, you're spreading it to other people. So you've got to practice social distancing. You have to clean off surfaces. All the recommendations that they're giving out there that we should be doing, you should be following, without exception. Now, another guideline that they've been saying, I have a problem with, and I understand where they were coming from when they made these guidelines, but the numbers don't make sense to me. So, the question is, how big a group can assemble and it be safe? First they said, well, we don't want to have groups more than 500 people assembling. And then it was 100, and then it was 50, and then it was 10. In my opinion, the biggest group size that should be allowed is 1. Because if you're with one other person and that person's got it, or if you've got it, you're going to transfer it from one to the other. So, maximum group size 1. Now, is that practical? No. But at least maybe you should treat family units like as an individual, so that restrict yourself, like when you're sheltering in place with your family, and if one family member gets it, the whole family is considered infected. So then the next thing that they were saying is, well, you shouldn't get tested unless you got fever and you're coughing and this, that, and the other. And I would like to make some comments on that. One, since we can't test the people who, we don't have enough tests to go around, I understand you've got to prioritize who gets the test because you don't have enough tests. That's different from saying whether you should get the test. Because in my opinion, we should be testing everyone, because we can't tell who the hell's got it. And if we could tell who had it, then we could be more specific of, well, who do we need to be careful for? Who do we need to trace contacts for? But we are totally blind because we haven't had any decent amount of testing. Now, there are 2 kinds of tests. One is the main test that's being used now, which is an RT-PCR, and that stands for reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. And you take a swab from the throat, the nose, and you take a small amount of the genetic material, and then it gets multiplied in a test tube, and it can be detected that way. This detects, for this test to be positive, you have to have particles of the virus in the sample. Now, so that represents something happening right now with the patient. It won't tell you if somebody had it previously and now is cleared and immune. Doesn't give you that answer. And there could be a problem, we don't know yet, but we suspect there's a problem with somebody who has recently recovered from their infection and has leftover virus particles in their respiratory tract, and they're being detected by the test, but they're no longer infectious. The virus is dead. It's been killed off by the body. We don't know that for sure yet, but because we've got some patients still testing positive weeks after they've recovered from their infection, we're wondering, and we need to check that out and compare these RT-PCR tests with virus cultures in order to determine whether we're getting some false positives in people who have recovered. So that will remain to be determined. Now, so because there's a huge pool of people out there who are running around who have no symptoms, and we have to treat everyone as if, as if we've got it. Um, uh, 1 second. So, the next thing that I want to cover is that we don't have yet a serology test. Now, a serology test measures antibodies. And this is your body's responding and to the infection and fighting it off by creating these antibodies which neutralize the virus. The test is not available. If we had the test, we could take samples of 1,000 patients here, 1,000 patients there, to find out what percentage of our population has already been infected and recovered and hopefully immune to this. We don't know that yet. It would also give us an idea as to the denominator. In other words, how many infections are going on out there. What if we did this survey and found out that 30% of the population had antibodies to the virus already? That would mean there's been a whole lot more of this than we realized, and it was totally invisible to us. Until we run those tests, we won't know. But I suspect there's a significant amount of it going around there. I just don't know how much. We've got to do those studies, and we can't do those studies until that test becomes available, and it's not available yet. Okay. So as Sanjay Gupta was saying, I don't want to be an alarmist, but if you can't tell whether you or anyone around you has this infection or not, the only way you can proceed safely is to treat everyone, including yourself, as if you have the virus and act accordingly to do what you need to do so that if you have it or they have it, you don't spread it to each other. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks for watching.